I'm Carol Gaab, and I'm a clay sculptor. Welcome to seeing some of the work that I'm doing. This first piece is called Holding the Thread, and it came out of a body of work called Learning How to Breathe Underwater. And the beginning of that body of work was when I got a diagnosis of cancer almost 9 years ago now. And I remember turning to my husband as we left the meeting where I got the diagnosis, you know, how am I going to live with this? That was what was utmost in my mind. How am I going to live with this? And out of that question came some of the pieces that you're going to see today, and this being one of them. And holding the thread has a lot to do with those times in our life where we're just thrown off our feet. And the ground that we had at one time is gone. And it feels like we're either balancing on a ball or not able to find the ground. Can we, and ideally if we can find that thread in our lives that helps us stay connected to us, ourselves, and to our life, whatever that might be. For me, a lot of times it's our garden and our animals, and certainly my art. All my pieces are clay, and they're all made with coils, so it's hollow inside, and I make them whole, and then I decide where I want to cut them so that they can both fit in my kiln and I can carry them. On this particular piece, and on the back that you can't see right now, I've added, this is called luster, and it's a copper luster that actually turns, it turns into the copper metal on the actual piece. And then this is a metal rod within her hands. And the rest I use stains and oxides, natural materials, because I like that very raw look, particularly with this body of work. That was very in keeping with what it was about. This piece is called Bird Girl Woman. And it's a very interesting piece to me, and as they say sometimes, art imitates life or life imitates art. My father died 2.5 months before I got my diagnosis of cancer, and I had scheduled to go to a workshop to learn how to work with sawdust clay, basically where you add a lot of sawdust so that the piece can dry very fast and you can fire it very fast. And I was just driven, and in 2.5 days I made this piece. And what's interesting to me, I hadn't yet known that I was going to be diagnosed with cancer, is that she came out, and it was my left breast was where the cancer was found, and how it ended up being fired. And not only that the left breast has some cracks in it, but also the glaze, which was not my intention, actually to me at least, looks like tears coming down her face. I feel like she really was a premonition for the future, and I didn't really know what she meant at that point. But she's holding an egg. And you know, what I didn't know was that a new life was going to be formed out of this time. She's also made out of clay, and again is hollow inside. I make all my pieces the same way, and then they have an armature that holds the piece together, a metal armature inside. Another part of her that I didn't know, and a friend of mine who has studied a lot of history and symbolism, is that the bird goddess is known for being the giver of life and death. And I really believe that we all have inside of us a certain kind of collective unconscious that we resonate with certain symbolisms. And that I believe that woman was coming through me, because that's certainly what she was about. This piece is called Hekati Henry. Again, this is part of the body of work called Learning How to Breathe Underwater. And even though I didn't have the connection to Hekati, the Greek goddess, when I made her, she's just something that, how I work is from the inside out. She just wanted to come out, and originally it was just her. And I remember when I got to her head and I wanted to put these kind of spiky things on it, I thought, oh my God, she looks like a Martian. But I am a slave to my muse, and I trust it, and I put them on her head. Later, again, finding out from some book I was reading where they talk about the goddess Hekati and what she's known for. She also has a crown on her head, and she's the goddess of the crossroads. And so that place where you come to at different times in your life, often many times, where we can either take the road that's familiar or we could take the road that hasn't been traveled. She's the wise counsel, if you tune into her, that can help you and support you to take that road that hasn't been traveled. And Henry had to come in because the turtle became my totem during that time. Initially, I felt so slowed down by getting the cancer and just felt like I was walking. I'm not even walking, I was crawling on the ground. And I was so used to moving at a fairly fast pace and being very productive. And I hated it. My self-esteem came up for me, and all the things that I identified myself with of being fast and productive and busy were not there. But what eventually happened is I started to notice how wonderful it was and what I had been missing by slowing down. And the turtle is around a lot of my pieces around the garden as a reminder that there's such gold when you can slow down and really be present and move at a different pace and have that choice. There's 3 of them. This was my first one. This is my second one, and this is my third one. And they have a lot to do with movement. And a lot of it also had to do with I really felt like my body became my enemy in some ways, and I really wanted to come back into my body. And these pieces really helped me to do that. Given that we're made up of mostly water, water was a symbolism for me, and the mosaics have something to do with the water going through the bodies and helping me to start to get more movement in my body. And so each one moves a little bit more, and the third one is the most in movement. These pieces I make similarly to the ones I've shown you. And I'll take off this piece so you can see that once I cut the piece and it's still wet, I add this sleeve on, kind of like a Lego toy, so that it can fit right in and it has a really firm fit together with the different pieces. And then my husband makes the armatures that go through the piece, start at the base of the cement stand and come through it and hold the piece together so that it's not going to fall down. This one was done with a lot of smaller coils, as you see out here, and I just had a lot of fun. It was very organic pieces. I didn't think about anything as I was doing it, and I really appreciate some of the design that came out of that. These pieces, besides having to do with movement, they also have to do with my own resurrection. You know, I felt like I was really floored, and I have a poem actually that goes with these pieces that has to do with coming out of the very dark place out into the light and reaching for that light of new life. This piece is a new piece in a body of work called The Body is Temple, and it was inspired by my mother's death this last year. And I knew I wanted to do something. I didn't know exactly what that would be. And one of the things I don't think I've mentioned is that my work really is, there's a lot of emotion in my work, which probably is very apparent. It's a place that I work with the emotions that come through me and my experiences and hopefully transform them. And this piece is called My Mother's Garden, and I didn't even know it really had to do with her until she got finished, and I was looking at a nest that was in my studio that wanted to come inside her. This nest was on one of my shelves in my studio, and I noticed it, and I thought I was going to be doing something totally different in the niche, but it said, I want to be there. So I brought it out, and then I had these wonderful colored dried rose petals, and I started putting them in there, and I realized this is the one. This is the piece for my mother. And I even found these little doll shoes that I also added to the nest. And one of the things that this piece is about for me is what can get passed on, certainly from a mother to a daughter. And one of the wonderful things my mother passed on to me is a love of gardens, the love of working with the earth. You know, she continues to live through me in this piece, and my connection to nature that I'm so grateful that I got from her. And the eggs represent, again, you know, what's going to come, in a sense, their new life, what's going to come now in my life. Not having my parents around, what newness, what is going to be birthed through that time. This piece is called Chrysalis, and she's a transition piece for me, again in this body of work of learning how to breathe underwater. And she came after resurrection. I actually used a mirror to look at myself as I was doing her face and to really express some of what I was going through. It was very hard, and when I finished the piece, I really had a hard time looking at her face, even though she was marrying something in me, and a very kind of deep place of some anguish. And yet, as some people have commented when they've seen her, they feel a sense of her giving birth. And later, I didn't know what was going to come into this area of her body, but it did end up being a baby coming out of this river. So now I look at her in a whole different light, that out of that place, out of that very difficult anguish, came something full of life. I have butterflies on her head that I put some jewels in to represent that transformative place that butterflies go through.
dostlar, yaktık dağlar.